At the start of our story, we see an old man coughing his lungs out, dramatically announcing, "I am an earthling from a civilized society. I came from a civilized society." Yeah, he's definitely not okay. Just then, a little girl enters his house, carrying food. She says, "Mr. CO, are you okay? My mother sent this for you." This is where we learn his name, CO, once a man from Earth, now a very tired, very unlucky old man. He thanks the girl, and as she sets down the food, she cheerfully replies, "Please get well soon and make more soap." Then, without hesitation, she runs off into the middle of a snowstorm like it's no big deal. Now, here's the truth about CO. 50 years ago, he was just an ordinary office worker. One day, while on his way to a workshop with his colleagues, disaster struck. A landslide swallowed them whole, and when they woke up, surprise! They were in a martial arts fantasy world. Imagine this, a fox the size of a house with 3 tails, a giant 2-headed snake, and sword-wielding maniacs flying through the sky. Basically, every fantasy novel he skimmed during lunch break had come to life. Among the 7 people who fell into this world, CO was the odd one out. Within 3 days, powerful sages descended from the heavens and handpicked his co-workers because apparently, they were all secret prodigies. Each one was whisked away to a glorious destiny. And CO? He and director Kim were left behind. No magical talents. No heavenly mentors. Just 2 regular dudes in the wrong story. For 6 months, they did nothing but manual labor just to eat. But eventually, director Kim snapped. He blew all his savings on a shady street martial arts book that everyone laughed at. And guess what? 3 months later, Kim had mastered it. Turns out, the guy was a hidden genius after all. From then on, Kim rose higher and higher, serving the nation, mastering advanced techniques, and eventually heading off to the legendary martial world of Jianghu. And poor CO? Well, he was still waiting for his special moment. Spoiler alert, it never came. Now, 50 years later, CO is just an old man coughing up blood, dying from something as stupid as a common cold. He reflects on his wasted life, how he learned the language, worked as a laborer, bought land, built his own house, and even tried his hand at business. The man actually invented soap in a medieval world. Yes, soap, the lifesaver of hygiene. For a while, that gave him some money and stability. But of course, life wasn't done kicking him while he was down. Thieves learned his method, copied it, and undercut him. The market that once let him breathe finally booted him out. Business gone. Pride gone. Everything gone. Now, he was waiting for the end. Alone in that small house, coughing blood into a cloth, he asked the world, "What do you want from me? I tried my hardest. What must I do?" It wasn't a heroic speech. It was the voice of a man who had been rejected so many times he'd stopped expecting anything else. "Why wasn't I chosen? Why does everything slip away?" he whispered. The answer was the same old silence. He no longer had the energy to keep his eyes open. Hope had taken its last breath. Then his life ended. And then, a light. He blinked. Opened his eyes. He looked at his own hand. Youth. No sagging skin. Fingers steady. He was wearing clothes that did not belong to this world. CO looked around. Then he saw them. Director Kim. Chief-O, Section Chief Jian. Deputy Manager Kong. Deputy Manager O, Manager Kim. Heart pounding. Air different. Memory sharp and cruel. He had regressed. Not reincarnated, not transmigrated, regression. He'd been sent back to an earlier time. His life had rewound. This was CO's first regression. Director Kim, confused, said, "What is happening? We were just on our way to a workshop." He didn't know why they were here. But CO did. This was the first day. The day of the landslide. 50 years of pain, jammed into a single memory flash that was fuzzy around the edges but still seared into his mind. Someone's voice behind him snapped the daydream. "Hey, Deputy Manager." The voice was Section Chief Jian. He'd forgotten the old title he once wore, Deputy Manager CO Yunhyun. The name landed like a stone. CO started to explain he'd been startled. Before he could finish, Jin's hand cut the air, a sharp slap across CO's face. Silence crashed down. Everyone froze. Section Chief Jian's face was thunder. "Deputy Manager CO, you dozed off while driving on a mountainside. You almost got us all killed. The accusation hung in the cold air like a verdict. He hadn't seen Section Chief Jian Monghun in a long time. Which is rude, because Jian made sure everyone remembered him mostly by being loud, entitled, and very proud of nepotism. At 32 he'd already snagged the position because he was the nephew of the company's executive director. Merit? Optional. When Jian lunged at Xiao in blind fury, Chifo stood up and put a hand between them. Enough, he said. The landslide wasn't Deputy Manager Xiao's fault. But Jian wasn't listening. Aren't you angry, Chifo? He spat, eyes wild. This idiot dozed off, that's why we're stranded. Xiao remembered, with that slow, sinking ache of memory, that he had dozed. It wasn't because he was weak. It was because Jian had piled all his work on Xiao the night before, the kind of favors that feel like sandbags in the dark. Originally Jian was supposed to drive. Originally everything was supposed to be different. Pointing a trembling finger at Xiao, Jian barked, "This stupid bastard, we're stranded because of him." That word stupid used to be a bell that tolled inside Xiao. For 50 years, it had rung every time he apologized, every time he let himself be crushed, by bandits, by officials, by bullies. He spent half a lifetime saying sorry because it hurt less than fighting back. But something in him had shifted. The old automatic apology snapped off like a weak wire. Xiao stood up. The air tightened. Section Chief Jian, Xiao said, voice flat. Now is not the time for finger-pointing. Jian charged like a spoiled storm. He punched. Xiao felt the punch, tasted the old rhythm of being hit, and then he did the one thing his past self had never dared. He fought back. He turned and punched Jian straight in the face, hard enough to send the man sprawling. Silence fell. Everyone froze, mouths opening and closing like half-souls. Xiao didn't stop. The punches came steady, not blind flails but the quick, pragmatic strikes of a man who'd been broken many times and learned exactly where to hit. Jian's bravado crumpled into something smaller. Fear replaced fury. 2 words slipped out, brittle and automatic, "I'm sorry." That was the moment the room realized the math had changed. These people had talent for flashy moves, titles, and posturing. What they lacked was something Xiao had in strange abundance: lived violence, the kind of hardened, unromantic toughness that makes people flinch when you stop apologizing and start acting. Xiao might not possess mythical cultivation or a fabled talent. But he had regression, a second chance, and he had memory. He knew how the years ahead would go. He also had the ugly, useful knowledge of how to make people afraid enough to stop hurting him. For the first time in 50 years, he didn't feel like a man waiting to be stepped on. He hadn't been chosen by those transcendent beings. He didn't have a miraculous talent that would make him celebrated in the martial world. What he did have, however, was something rarer, the chance to change what would happen next. Director Kim, Chief O, Deputy Manager Kong, Deputy Manager O, and Manager Kim stared at Xiao with wary, almost fearful eyes. Director Kim finally spoke, voice trembling with disbelief and something like concern. Deputy Manager Xiao, how could you beat a colleague like that? No matter what, that's. Xiao didn't argue. He bowed, neat and quick. You're right, Director Kim. I lost my temper. I apologize for startling everyone. He kept the apology short and tasteful. Because theatrics would only invite trouble, Director Kim nodded slightly. Section Chief Jian was harsh, yes. And the landslide wasn't your fault. Still, you went too far. Apologize to him directly. Xiao understood. Director Kim would one day become a powerful martial artist, he'd seen it in his past life. If Xiao supported him now, it could pay off later. Winning Director Kim's favor mattered. He turned toward Jian, extended a hand, and said evenly, my reaction was too much. I apologize. Jian's face was swollen from Xiao's blows. His fists clenched, fury in his eyes. But when he met Xiao's gaze, cold, fearless, utterly unshaken, he stopped. He turned away in silence. The tension slowly ebbed. Director Kim looked out at the endless trees and said, why don't we try leaving this forest? Maybe there's a village nearby. Xiao agreed out loud, it was the logical suggestion. But inside, he knew the truth. This was the ascension path. Here, immortals soared above, chasing eternity, while mortals fought with swords for scraps of power. The only law here was simple, the strong devour the weak. There were no villages, no nations, no safe havens. Only blood and survival. Still, he offered calmly, the sun will set soon. Let's focus on finding shelter first. Director Kim hesitated, then nodded. What about the car? We packed supplies for the workshop. Food, tools, we'll need them. CO already knew they'd never find it. The car was gone. But convincing them now would only waste energy. Better to let reality teach them. We should split up, he suggested. One group searches for shelter, the other searches for the car. We meet back here before nightfall. By dusk, CO had already secured a cave and lit a fire. The group gathered around the flames, exhausted, chewing quietly on what little they had. Then, breaking the silence, a black-haired girl frowned and said, I don't get it. We were caught in a landslide while in the car, the black-haired girl said, frowning. So how did we end up here, with the car completely gone? Director Kim nodded. I don't understand it either. As they ate, another girl picked up a piece of food and nibbled. This tastes like chestnuts, she commented. Shifo chuckled. Crunchy, isn't it? I've got plenty. Eat as much as you like. The mood lightened. Director Kim laughed. This is a serious situation, but thanks to Manager CO, we're still having fun. He turned toward CO. Back at the company, I knew you were dependable. I didn't expect you'd be even more reliable out here. Everyone chimed in with agreement. A brown-haired girl added, Manager CO really is diligent. A red-haired girl smiled. It even feels like we're on a camping trip, thanks to this cave he found. CO knew the truth, this cave had only been discovered much later in his past life, after everyone had wandered lost in the woods for hours. But he only gave a modest smile. I was just lucky. The others laughed and insisted he take the compliment. CO thought to himself, let them laugh. Tonight will be the last time they'll ever laugh like this. The next morning, CO's entire body trembled. He stood outside the cave and bowed low. Greetings to the Lord of the Forest. Towering before him was a massive seven-tailed fox. Its fur shimmered like blood-red flames, and its glowing eyes locked onto him. You carry a strange scent, human, the fox said with a cold smile. Even after thousands of years, I have never smelled a human like you. Hearing the rumbling voice, the black-haired girl stumbled outside, rubbing her eyes. Manager CO, what happened? She froze, staring at the beast. Her eyes widened in terror. Then she screamed. Her cry woke the rest of the group. One by one, they rushed outside only to stop dead when they saw the enormous fox. The moment the sight registered, their fear broke loose. Screams filled the air. Silence! CO barked, glaring at them. Show your manners to the Lord of the Forest, get on your knees. The fox's tail swayed, amused. Every time I meet humans, I'm reminded how foolish and rude you are. Normally, I would tear your limbs apart. His voice rumbled like thunder. But, one among you knows how to show respect. Because of him, I will spare you. Relief flickered through the group, but it was short-lived. Still, the fox continued, eyes narrowing, you trespassed into my territory. There must be a price. Offer me an arm, only then may you stay here. The color drained from everyone's faces. Fear gripped them tighter than chains. CO's heart pounded. In his past life, this moment had ended in disaster. The group had panicked, screamed, and angered the fox. All of them had died horribly. But now there was one difference. This time, the fox had noticed CO's manners. And for the first time, CO felt the faintest flicker of hope. CIO quickly calculated that only one arm was needed, just one person's sacrifice. And since the cultivators were expected to arrive in 2 days, whoever lost an arm could be healed then. Plus, CO had already prepared a special herb to ease the pain. So, without hesitation, CO rolled up his sleeve and stretched out his arm toward the fox. His whole body trembled as he said, I'll offer mine. Everyone froze in shock. CO was about to give up his own arm for them. The seven-tailed fox's eyes glowed as it leaned forward. You know your manners, it said with a grin. I'll try to make it as painless as possible. The next second, chomp. CO screamed in agony as the fox bit off his arm in one clean motion. Blood spilled, the sound echoed, and everyone turned away, unable to watch the gruesome sight. CO's face twisted in pain as he reached with his remaining arm to grab the herb. He chewed it quickly, tears running down his face. The burning pain slowly faded. After finishing its meal, the fox looked at CO and said, I thought you might taste different since you smell different, but you're just like the rest. Maybe worse. So many impurities in your blood. Seo, still catching his breath, managed to bow slightly and apologize. I'm sorry, my offering wasn't good enough. The fox didn't even respond. You may stay in my territory for 7 days, it said, turning away. You won't die, thanks to my divinity. With that, it leapt into the sky and vanished. The group rushed towards Seo, terrified and worried. But Seo slowly stood up, his face pale, and told everyone to follow him inside. Once they were in the cave, he explained everything. He had met the fox earlier that morning. That's when he learned the shocking truth: they were in Nurum. Everyone gasped. Director Kim stuttered, "Wait, are you saying we're actually in Nurum?" Seo nodded weakly. Yes. And we'll be safe for a week, because I offered my arm. But when Kim asked what would happen after that week, Seo sighed heavily. Then, we'll have to give up something else. The room went silent. Nobody spoke. As the herb started to make him drowsy, Seo's eyelids grew heavy. I'll rest for a bit, he murmured. Please, understand. And with that, he fell asleep right there, exhausted and broken. 15 hours later, night had fallen. Seo woke up alone inside the dark cave. When Seo woke up, he could hear his colleagues arguing outside the cave. They were furious, all shouting at John. How could you even say that Manager Seo sacrificed his own arm? One of them snapped. But John fired back, then who's going to do it next time, huh? You? Who wants to lose an arm or a leg every week? That shut everyone up for a moment until Chief O stepped in. Watch your mouth, he growled. Manager Seo is the one feeding us and giving us shelter. Without him, we'd be dead already. Then, out of nowhere, John spoke up with a cold tone. All the more reason we should learn everything we can from him while he's still alive. He's already lost one arm, he won't last long anyway. Let him be the sacrifice again next time. John said it casually, not knowing Seo was awake and listening from the shadows. Seo froze. His heart sank. So that's how they saw him now? Just spare parts for survival? Anger burned inside him. He picked up a rock, staring at it. With all the pain and beatings he'd suffered for 50 years, he knew he could kill a modern man like John even with one arm. He glanced at John again, who was still trying to convince everyone to use him as the next sacrifice. For a moment, Seo's mind went dark. Should I just crush his skull right here? But then he sighed and dropped the rock. Acting rashly would only create more chaos. Fear was already eating everyone alive, and if he killed John, he'd lose Director Kim's trust too. Just then, Shifo snapped at John, "Shut up before I break your ankles again." That made Seo chuckle quietly to himself. They're still good people, he thought. Just scared and confused. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the cave entrance. Everyone gathered outside, tense and cautious. That's when a two-headed snake slithered out from the forest. But unlike the fox who had devoured Seo's arm, this one only hissed, "Just a bit of blood will do." Seo recognized it immediately. It was the same monster that had drained Chifo's blood in their past life. Chifo froze, but hearing it only wanted a little blood, he took a deep breath and stretched out his arm. The snake bit down, drank, and then suddenly vomited. "This is disgusting," it hissed. "This is the worst blood I've ever tasted." Chifo's face turned red with anger. "What did you just say?" Seo couldn't help but think, well, it's the blood of a 21st century office worker, nicotine, stress, cholesterol, of course it's nasty. Trying not to laugh, Seo turned to John and said, "Come with me. We're going to gather some herbs." John blinked, confused. "Wait, did you just call me by my full name?" Seo didn't answer. He just asked calmly, "Are you hungry?" John nodded nervously. "Why, yeah." "Good," Seo said, walking closer. "I'll show you which fruits and herbs are edible. Follow me." As they walked deeper into the forest, Seo leaned close and whispered, "Next week, I plan to give my other arm to the fox. If I die, someone needs to know how to survive here." John froze. The color drained from his face. He realized Seo had heard everything from the night before. All he could do was nod and mumble, Thank you, Manager Seo." But inside, his heart pounded with fear. When John thanked Seo for teaching him, Seo smiled politely, but inside, he was laughing. Only I know the fox isn't coming back, he thought. So all this survival training is useless anyway. After walking for a while, they reached a grove full of fruit trees. Seo pointed and said, "John Mong Hoon." How many times do I have to tell you that's the wrong fruit? Concentrate. John, panting, apologized and picked up a bright red fruit. Co immediately shook his head. Put that down unless you want to die on the spot. This little routine went on for hours, Co barking orders, John stumbling to keep up, confused and exhausted. At one point, John slumped down and said, "Manager Co, can we please take a break? I've been digging non-stop." Co chuckled to himself. Now you know how I felt when you worked me to death back at the office, huh? Out loud, he just said calmly, "No breaks. We have to finish before sunset." "Keep going." John groaned but obeyed. Then suddenly, thud. John's shovel hit something solid. When he pulled it out, his eyes widened. "Whoa, this ginseng is huge," he exclaimed. "Is this real?" Co glanced at it and nodded. "Something like that." He explained that it wasn't ordinary ginseng, but a yellow bamboo root, a rare plant that looked similar but was much more valuable here. Normally, those roots were no thicker than a pinky finger. But in this world, overflowing with spiritual energy, it had grown as large as John's arm. "It's useless to high-level cultivators," Co said, "but for martial artists, it's a treasure. It could really help Director Kim increase his ki." They found 2 more growing nearby. John's eyes lit up. "Are you sure it's okay to take all of these?" "Of course," Co said. "Now take off your shirt, we'll use it to carry them." John hesitated but did as told, carefully wrapping the massive roots in his shirt. Then Co looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, and near the horizon, a glowing crack shimmered in midair. His expression hardened. "It's almost time," he muttered. "Let's head back." They hurried toward the cave. But before they could reach it, the crack in the sky suddenly exploded, a blinding flash and a thunderous boom followed by waves of raw spiritual energy. John was thrown to the ground, clutching his head and screaming in pain. Chief O and Manager Kong collapsed too, writhing and yelling as the energy tore through them. "What's happening?" Director Kim shouted, panicking as he rushed to them. And then, 3 figures appeared, descending from the sky like gods. They were cultivators. The one in golden robes smirked. Well, well. What a surprise, uncut talent in a place like this." Another, dressed in black, frowned. "Back off, Bayuko. They're mine." The third, wearing blue, snorted. "Shameless, Huwok. You're always trying to steal others' prey." Director Kim was startled by the appearance of the cultivators and quickly asked who they were. The cultivators observed the group, 7 people in total, and noted that only 3 had spiritual roots. The rest were ordinary mortals. Yuko raised his hand and conjured a sphere of crackling lightning. In an instant, he hurled it at John. Thunder roared as countless bolts surged through John's body, making him scream in agony. When the lightning finally subsided, Yuko stared in astonishment. John's body had endured the full storm. It was no ordinary physique, it carried the rare heavenly golden thunder constitution. Then Hogwack stepped forward, motioning Buko aside. Holding his strange musical instrument, he began to play. The melody was haunting, almost beautiful, until Manager Kong, clutching her ears, suddenly let out an ear-piercing scream. Her cry echoed through the forest like a banshee's wail. Hogwack's eyes lit up in excitement as he realized she possessed the ghostly transforming immortal root, a talent so rare he never believed it actually existed. Next came the third cultivator. Descending silently, he placed his hand on Chief O's shoulder and infused a surge of spiritual energy into him. His expression shifted to awe. "A unique holy body," he murmured. Chief O stared in confusion and fear as the cultivator smiled and declared, "You 3 will become disciples of the Azure Heaven Creation Sect. With talents like yours, you have the power to change the world." The cultivator's presence was terrifying, his voice resounded like thunder, and Chief O could barely breathe. The crushing aura made him feel that refusal might mean instant death. Before he could respond, a voice rang from above. Haiwa descended gracefully, interrupting. "Why join him?" he asked. "Come to the Black Ghost Valley instead. We offer every cultivation method, immortality, endless power, fame, and wealth. Serve us, and within 100 years, you'll rule the heavens themselves." Almost immediately, Bo appeared, his robe rippling with divine light. "Nonsense," he shouted. "The Golden Divine Heavenly Thunder sect is far more suited for them." While the cultivators argued, Director Kim, trembling and desperate, cut in. "See, can you at least help us get out of this forest? We'll die here if we stay." But none of them paid him any mind. Buko scoffed and pulled a small bottle from his sleeve. Mortals worry too much, he said mockingly. How did you even reach the ascension path with such weak bodies? He uncorked the bottle, aimed it at John, and in a flash of light, John was pulled inside, screaming for help until his voice vanished entirely. The blue-robed cultivator calmly took hold of Chief O, then turned to Sio. You lost your arm to that fox, didn't you? He said kindly. With a smile, he offered aid, channeling spiritual power to restore the limb. Sio's hand regenerated completely, and he expressed heartfelt thanks. Haiwa then took Manager Kong with him, with their chosen disciples in tow. The three cultivators ascended back into the sky. Before departing, they informed Sio that all beasts and monsters on the ascension path had been captured and that the forest would remain safe for the next decade. Watching them leave, Director Kim ran after them, shouting desperately, "Wait! Tell us where to go. We don't even know which way is safe." As the cultivators vanished into the sky, Director Kim shouted after them, calling out to Section Chief J, Chief O, and Deputy Manager Kong, but his voice faded with no response. The glowing figures soared higher until they disappeared completely. Sio stood still, disappointment written across his face. This scene felt all too familiar, just like 50 years ago, when pleading and shouting meant nothing. Cultivators always treated them like insects, ignoring their cries. Still, Sio found a small bit of comfort knowing his arm had been healed. Director Kim, however, didn't give up. He ran as fast as he could in the cultivator's direction, breath heavy and heart pounding, before collapsing to the ground. What do you expect us to do? He gasped, in a forest like this. Just as despair began to take over, he spotted streaks of light cutting across the dark sky, many of them, all flying toward where the cultivators had gone. What are those lights? He wondered out loud. Is something happening over there? But unwilling to leave his team behind, he turned back the next day. Rain poured over the forest, lightning flashing every few seconds. Inside a damp cave, four figures, Deputy Manager O, Manager Kim, Manager CIO, and Director Kim, huddled for safety. Deputy Manager O lay on the cold ground, coughing up blood. Her breathing was shallow, and her face had turned pale. Panicking, Manager Kim turned to CIO. There must be some kind of herb we can use. She's getting worse by the minute. CIO shook his head, calm but grim. We should wait. Maybe someone will come and heal her. Manager Kim looked puzzled. Wait for who? She asked, but before CIO could reply, heavy footsteps echoed through the cave. A deep voice rang out, smooth and commanding. Mortals on the ascension path are like ants, trapped in the battles of dragons. Everyone froze. Director Kim stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? He demanded. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a man with an aura so vast it felt like the ocean itself. A faint smile curved his lips. I am the Sea Dragon King, Sio Huel, he said calmly. The Sea Dragon King glanced toward Deputy Manager O and continued, the storm outside, she's the one controlling it. Shock rippled through the group. That's impossible. The Sea Dragon King's expression softened. When the storm suddenly appeared, I came to investigate. But to think the one causing it is this unconscious woman, he shook his head, amazed. She has no cultivation power, not even a trace of spiritual energy. Yet she commands a storm beyond mortal comprehension, and she's not even aware she's doing it. Sio stepped forward, his tone firm but weary. We're the ones who are confused here. We've only been in this place a short time, yet one by one, powerful beings like you keep appearing and taking our friends away. The Sea Dragon King laughed, a deep, rolling sound that echoed off the cave walls. So you're telling me that among your group, several have extraordinary potential, and conveniently, powerful cultivators appeared one after another to claim them as disciples? He smirked. And now, I arrived by chance, only to find another? Sio nodded slowly. That's exactly what happened. The Sea Dragon King looked at Sio with a calm smile and asked, Dear mortal, do you know where we are? He explained that this place was called the Ascension Path, or the Path to Ascension, a crucial gateway leading to the upper realm. In just a few months, he continued, a dimensional rift called the Ascension Gate will open right here. It appears once every 1,000 years. By then, countless high-level cultivators and spiritual beings will have gathered around the path, ready to ascend to the upper realm. Sio finally understood the reason behind the arrival of so many powerful cultivators. Director Kim then spoke up, curious and concerned. Those cultivators said they were taking my colleagues to join their sect. But if they're ascending to the upper realm, how can my colleagues truly join them here? The Sea Dragon King chuckled softly and replied. That might be hard for mortals like you to understand. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small bottle, similar to those carried by the cultivators. You see, among cultivators, there's a secret technique that allows large objects, even entire sects, to be shrunk and stored inside magical tools like this. He held up the bottle for all to see. These cultivators have likely sealed their whole sect inside such vessels, so they can ascend together. The Sea Dragon King's expression turned proud as he added, I have done the same, packed one of my undersea castles here. Inside, 1,800 sea dragons lie dormant, waiting for the ascension gate to open. CIO and Director Kim gasped in shock at the sheer scale of this revelation. Turning to the unconscious deputy manager O, the Sea Dragon King gently patted her head. She is peculiar and intriguing. If she were to join the Sea Dragon clan, she could become something truly extraordinary. At that moment, Director Kim jumped to stop the Sea Dragon King, but the next second he fell to his knees as very powerful force pinned him to the ground. When Director Kim tried to fight that force, it increased every time, putting more pressure on him. The one putting that pressure was the Sea Dragon King. I will give her my blood, accept her as my kin. That will be best for all of you. Then, fixing Director Kim with glowing green eyes, he warned in a low voice. Never casually question high-level cultivators. Many would kill you for such insolence. Suddenly, the pressure intensified, pinning both Director Kim and CO so hard that their eyes nearly popped from their sockets. Still holding Deputy Manager O, the Sea Dragon King began walking out of the cave. I have answered because I am generous, he said. Most cultivators would have killed you for even asking. Stepping into the thunderstorm outside, his form began to shift. Scales glistened, wings unfurled, and he transformed into his magnificent dragon shape, so vast and strong it seemed to touch the sky itself. For with a powerful beat of his wings, he soared into the stormy heavens and disappeared into the clouds. Suddenly, the thunderstorm stopped. The sky cleared as if nothing had ever happened. Manager Kim stood frozen, her mind completely overwhelmed. All her colleagues had been kidnapped. An avalanche had appeared out of nowhere, and then, powerful immortals and even dragons had swooped in to abduct her friends. She simply couldn't process any of it. Her thoughts began to unravel. CO approached slowly, trying to calm her. But Manager Kim, trembling, whispered in desperation, Manager CO, please, you must not be taken too. If you are, I won't survive in this forest alone. Tears streamed down her face. CO wanted to promise her that he would stay, but deep down, he knew their time was running out. Suddenly, Manager Kim clutched her head and screamed. She collapsed to the ground, crying out, something's coming. Director Kim burst onto the scene, alarmed. What's wrong with her now? He shouted. Before anyone could react, the jungle erupted into chaos. Birds scattered from the trees. Animals fled in every direction. Manager Kim shivered and whispered in awe, He's coming. Director Kim looked confused. Then, from the chaos, an old man appeared riding a massive mechanical lion. His eyes burned with wisdom and power as he stared at the mortals trapped in the ascension path. How did mere mortals end up here? He growled. But as he studied them more closely, realization dawned on his face. When the ascension gate is about to open, the space around it becomes unstable, he said with a proud laugh. You must have been caught in a spatial storm. Climbing down from his mechanical lion, the old man's gaze sharpened. Who just emitted that massive consciousness? He asked, eyes gleaming with excitement. For a moment, I thought a sage from the upper realm had descended. His focus landed on Deputy Manager O's weakened form. Is it her? He muttered. Director Kim stepped forward quickly. Manager Kim is our colleague, he said firmly. But before he could say another word, the old man flicked his finger and Director Kim was hurled across the clearing. CO dashed forward to catch him, shielding him from the impact, but the force sent CO crashing hard into the ground. Director Kim scrambled up, unharmed, and thanked him. But CO didn't respond. Panic struck as Director Kim helped him to his feet, only to see CO's entire back torn and bloodied from the fall. Are you all right? Director Kim asked, his voice trembling. In a calm but raspy tone, CO replied, I'm fine. Meanwhile, the old man approached Deputy Manager O, lifting her chin gently. He spoke with a strange mix of compassion and command. Let me take you with me, he said. You may not have any spiritual roots now, but with my power, I can awaken them. The old man wondered aloud what might happen if such a strange consciousness were ever to evolve into a cultivator's divine awareness. Deputy Manager O began to weep, her eyes darting helplessly towards CO and Director Kim for help. The old man's gaze hardened. Is she still clinging to her worldly attachments, even after I offered to take her in? His patience shattered into anger. With a sudden surge of power, he seized both CO and Director Kim by the throat and lifted them effortlessly into the air. They gasped, their faces twisting in pain as they struggled to breathe under his crushing grip. Turning to Deputy Manager O, the old man declared coldly, I will sever every one of her worldly ties myself. The sight of CO and Director Kim struggling for their lives terrified her. Tears streamed down her face as she cried, please, don't hurt them. I'll do whatever you ask. Just spare them. The old man's voice was calm yet merciless. You must forget all your worldly attachments. Between broken sobs, Deputy Manager O whispered that she understood. Satisfied, the old man released his grip. CO and Director Kim fell to the ground, gasping for air, their bodies trembling. But the old man knew leaving them there would not be enough. Their bonds still lingered. He raised his hand, and a shimmering portal burst open in the air, spinning with light and thunderous energy. To free you fully, he said to Deputy Manager O, your two colleagues will be scattered through a dimensional rift. Even I do not know where they will land. The portal widened, its pull growing stronger with each heartbeat. Before anyone could react, Director Kim was pulled in first, vanishing into the swirling void. Deputy Manager O screamed, her voice echoing across the clearing. No! CO, using the last of his strength, grabbed the bundle of herbs he had gathered the day before. The wind tore around him, and in a flash of blinding light, he too was swallowed by the portal. Then, silence. The rift closed, and darkness fell. Moments later, sound returned, not the roar of battle, but the hum of life. A chorus of voices filled the air, merchants calling out, vendors hawking their goods. Somewhere nearby, a stall owner shouted, finest silks in Yango. Newly arrived scriptures from Shangji. CO stirred, groaning softly. He opened his eyes and found himself lying in a narrow alleyway, surrounded by the bustle of a strange, unfamiliar city. As he rose unsteadily, he stepped toward the street, where hundreds of people moved about their day, unaware of what had just occurred. Nothing looked familiar, yet the air, the rhythm, even the scent of incense felt oddly known to him. His eyes widened as he looked up at a towering 10-story building dominating the skyline. Recognition struck. This was Yango, the capital. Seong City. Heart racing, CO turned and hurried back to where Director Kim lay unconscious. CO returned to Director Kim and gently woke him up. Director Kim, completely exhausted, told Manager CO that he couldn't keep up with everything that was happening anymore. CO admitted he felt the same way. With a weary sigh, Director Kim said, it would be nice if all of this were just a dream. It was hard to believe that only the two of them remained. The silence left behind by their missing friends was almost unbearable. Still, Director Kim found some small comfort in the thought that, at least, they hadn't been taken by those monsters. CO glanced at him quietly. Even he didn't fully understand what was happening. Though he had regressed, in his past life, he was nothing more than an herb gatherer, simple, powerless, and forgotten by the world. After a moment, CO sighed and said, we can't stay in this alley forever. Why don't we get out of here? Director Kim nodded slowly. All right, he agreed, and together, they stepped out into the open street. But the instant they emerged, everything changed. The bustling crowd fell silent. Every face turned toward them. People whispered among themselves in an unfamiliar tongue. Director Kim frowned in confusion. CO, he asked quietly, what are they saying? It sounds like Chinese, but why are they whispering and staring at us? CO listened for a moment before replying calmly, some of them are saying our clothes look funny. Director Kim's eyes widened in surprise. CO gave a small, reassuring smile. Relax, he said. I know a little bit of Chinese. But deep down, CO knew he wasn't telling the full truth. The language wasn't Chinese, not exactly. It used the same characters, yes, but the sounds, the rhythm, even the tone were completely different. In his past life, he had endured months of ridicule from street beggars just to learn the basics of this ancient dialect. Now, he didn't need to struggle. He understood it instinctively. He reached into his pouch and pulled out the herbs he had collected earlier. Should we buy some new clothes? He asked. Director Kim looked puzzled. How? I don't think the people here will accept our money, he said. CO didn't answer. Instead, he gestured for Director Kim to follow. They made their way to the city's medicine hall. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with sharp eyes, nearly dropped his scales when he saw the ginseng. Are you really selling these? He asked in disbelief. CO kept his tone firm. These yellow bamboo roots are over 800 years old, he said confidently. The shopkeeper's expression shifted immediately. Of course, he said, nodding eagerly. At that age, they're worth at least 15 silver ingots. Even Seo felt a twinge of disbelief at that number. 15 silver ingots, more than he had ever seen in his previous life. But he maintained his calm, completing the exchange with quiet authority. Moments later, they left the medicine hall with money in hand. Their first purchase was clothing, fine, simple robes that helped them blend in. Their second was shelter. When Director Kim saw the house they had chosen, a sprawling courtyard mansion just beyond the city's main road, his jaw dropped. "We're going to live here?" he asked, still stunned. Seo nodded with a faint smile. "Starting today," he said, "I'll teach you the language of this place." Director Kim's face brightened, his earlier fear replaced by gratitude. "Thank you, Seo," he said sincerely. "For everything." Seo smiled quietly in return, his eyes distant yet calm. In that moment, he wasn't just surviving, he was preparing. Deep down, he knew, this was only the beginning. After bribing a few officials for identity plaques and purchasing both the land and their new home, Seo and Director Kim were left with just 1 silver ingot. Seo guessed it was because they were in the capital, everything here was simply more expensive. Director Kim's eyes drifted to Seo's back. Even beneath his fresh clothes, the fabric was darkened by red stains. The wounds from before hadn't yet healed. Feeling both guilt and gratitude for everything Seo had done, Director Kim spoke gently. "Since we're in a new place now," he said, "why don't you just call me by my name?" Seo blinked in mild surprise, then nodded. "That's fine with me." A smile spread across Director Kim's face as he said softly, "Thank you." That night, after they had settled into their new home, Seo laid out the last of their remaining ginseng roots on the table. The faint herbal scent filled the room. "I sold those herbs," he explained. "That's how we got the money." He warned that once the herbs ran out, they would have no steady income left. "We need a plan," he added, "something that can keep us going." Director Kim stared at the roots thoughtfully. Then, as if struck by inspiration, he looked up. "What if we sell the last few herbs for silver," he suggested, "and start a small business?" Seo smiled. "That's a good plan," he said. With their savings and Director Kim's experience as a former company director, it was a realistic start. But Seo's thoughts went beyond survival. Having regressed to an earlier point in time, he wondered why not use this chance to change history itself. He knew Director Kim was no ordinary man. In the previous timeline, he had gone from reading mediocre martial arts manuals found on street stalls to becoming a martial master in just a few months. Later, after studying true techniques, he rose to become one of the greatest warriors in all of Youngho. But what if, this time, he began training with the very best arts from the very beginning? A quiet smile tugged at Seo's lips. If everything went as planned, the rise of the greatest swordsman in Youngho could come 30 years earlier than it once had. Determined, Seo turned to his companion. "This world," he said, "is Maroom, a world of martial arts." Director Kim's eyes lit up with curiosity. Seo cautioned him, "If anyone learns about our plans, we might attract the wrong kind of attention, local gangs, rival sections." "So," Seo continued, "shouldn't we at least learn some self-defense?" The mention of martial arts sparked genuine excitement in Director Kim's eyes. Yet he hesitated. "But most sects guard their techniques," he said. "They don't just teach outsiders." Seo chuckled knowingly. He could already tell his friend's curiosity had been ignited. As a lifelong Maroom novel enthusiast, Seo knew exactly how to draw him in. He explained to Director Kim that in this city there are 7 famous sections. Among them, the demon-slaying sect, self-binding temple, suppressing Brit house, and 7 mysteries sect are on orthodox side of the Youngho. Whereas the Wolf Fawn Gang, the Dark Knight Association, and the Dragon Fighting Stronghold are considered unorthodox. Together with other factions, people refer to them as the 4 stars and the 3 demons. The demon-slaying sect focuses mainly on sword and blade techniques. The self-binding temple is a Buddhist sect. The suppressing birdhouse is similar to the house sect but specializes in intelligence and strategy. Meanwhile, the 7 mysteries sect has a long history and teaches a wide range of martial arts. In contrast, very little is known about the 3 demons. Rumor has it that they excel in stealth and sorcery, often engaging in illegal activities. After explaining all this, Seo asked Director Kim which sect he preferred. Without hesitation, Director Kim chose the demon-slaying sect, saying that a true martial artist should wield a sword and that a man should master the blade. Seo found that choice fitting, considering Director Kim had once been known as the greatest swordsman in his past life. Surprised, Director Kim asked how Seo knew about that. Seo just laughed and admitted he had overheard some martial artists talking earlier. 3 months later, Seo and Director Kim arrived at the demon-slaying sect. However, the guards blocked their way, demanding to know their purpose. Seo introduced Director Kim as his older brother and said they had heard of the sect's fame, hoping to learn martial arts there. The guard, a tall and muscular man, looked them over. Judging by their clothes, he figured they had some money. Still, he told Director Kim that starting martial arts training at his age would be difficult. Seo chuckled and discreetly handed the guard a silver coin, asking if they could at least meet someone of higher rank even if it was just for basic self-defense lessons. With that little bribe, the guard allowed them to enter. Inside, they were brought before an elder of the sect. The elder asked if they wished to learn martial arts for self-defense. Seo smiled and said they wanted to learn the best techniques possible, offering a small box filled with silver nuggets. Seeing all that silver, the elder agreed, saying they could join as external disciples. However, after taking the silver, he added that the sect didn't give special treatment to those who joined through donations and that they would only accept one of them. Seo was stunned. All that money had only bought them a single entry worth just one yellow bamboo routes donation. Director Kim tried to protest, thinking they were being scammed, but before he could say anything, Seo quickly accepted the offer and thanked the elder, saying his brother would be the one to learn. Director Kim was completely shocked by Seo's decision. As they were leaving, the elder turned to Director Kim and told him to come later to the training grounds where all the external disciples gathered. Outside, still confused, Director Kim asked Seo. Director Kim was frustrated. "What's the point if only I get to learn martial arts?" he said. "If I'd known it'd cost this much, I would have chosen a different sect." Seo turned back with a calm smile. "Don't worry about it," he said. He laughed lightly, then added, "I'll use the rest of the money to start a small business and support us. You just focus on training." Director Kim was stunned. He couldn't believe how much Seo was willing to sacrifice for him. Deeply moved, he promised, "I'll do my best." But even then, he couldn't hide his uncertainty. He was older now, and didn't know if he truly had what it took. Seo placed a hand on his shoulder. "Believe in yourself. You can do it." Director Kim nodded and headed off to train with the outer disciples. 7 months later, a grand competition was being held within the demon-slaying sect and the entire sect was in shock. In just 7 months, Director Kim had defeated every single disciple. The elders were furious and confused. "How could some outsider, who joined only months ago, defeat our disciples so easily?" they shouted. The sect was in complete chaos. To master a martial art means not just learning its techniques, but truly understanding its meaning, becoming one with the art itself. Normally, even a third-rate warrior who grasps that meaning could rise to second-rate through years of effort. Advancing further requires even greater comprehension, time, and perseverance. But once in a while, a genius appears, someone whose talent allows them to break through levels that others spend decades to reach. The demon-slaying sect, one of the greatest sects of Seokyong City, was full of such prodigies. Yet somehow, an outsider had surpassed them all. In just half a year, Director Kim had become a first-rate warrior, completely mastering the sect's ultimate technique, the absolute dragon saber. The Grand Elder was furious. He couldn't accept that an outsider had reached first-rate in such a short time, a level normally achievable only through the combined guidance of countless masters. To the sect, it felt as though their pride and legacy had bowed to one man. In his rage, the Grand Elder ordered the guards to capture Director Kim immediately. Director Kim was seized and locked inside a heavily guarded house, surrounded by hundreds of soldiers. But things didn't end there. Seo was captured too. The sect believed there was no way an outsider could advance so far so fast without help, and rumors spread that they were spies from a rival faction. Seo couldn't understand it. He didn't even know martial arts. Frustrated, he asked Director Kim. Inside the room, Director Kim continued practicing his sword techniques when Seo suddenly asked, "Are you not worried at all?" Director Kim paused and laughed. "Worried? About what?" Seo frowned. "About them suspecting you of being a spy. In martial arts stories, people like that usually have their core destroyed or their energy flow cut off." Director Kim nodded. "That's true, but for some reason, I feel like I'm close to reaching another wall. If I can just push through, I might advance to the next stage." Seo was speechless. How could this man be such a monster? It hadn't even been that long since Director Kim became a first-rate martial artist, and now he was already nearing the next realm. Seo knew that the stage after first-rate was Martial Peak, a level where the sect leaders and elders of great sects resided. In all of Yenghua, those at Martial Peak were called absolute masters, and there were barely 1,000 of them across the entire nation. Beyond that, no one spoke of any higher stage. Martial Peak was considered the ultimate limit of human mastery. Xiao realized his earlier assumptions were wrong. At this rate, the birth of the world's greatest swordsman was happening not 30 years early, but 40. 7 days later, Xiao and Director Kim were still imprisoned. But while Xiao worried, Director Kim didn't waste a moment. He spent every hour practicing and meditating in silence. Then, after a full week, something incredible happened. The energy around him condensed into 3 glowing lotus flowers floating in the air, manifestations of pure qi. Xiao's eyes widened in disbelief. Those are the flowers of qi. They only appear to martial artists who reach Martial Peak, and 3 flowers gathered means. Director Kim slowly inhaled, absorbing the lotus energy into his body. A powerful aura spread through the room. When the light faded, he stood up and said calmly, "I've crossed the barrier. I don't fear the demon-slaying sect leader anymore." Xiao was amazed. "Your talent, it's beyond anything I imagined." Director Kim smiled, slightly proud. "I'm surprised myself. I never thought I'd have this kind of ability. Maybe this is why I loved martial arts novels so much as a kid." Just then, the door burst open. An elder of the demon-slaying sect entered with a squad of guards and announced, "Here comes Jim Yonghan and his accomplice." The elder pulled out a scroll and declared coldly, "By order of the sect leader, destroy the chi core of the spy who dared to steal our martial techniques." Director Kim glared at the elder, fury in his eyes. Xiao panicked and tried to explain, "Wait. We're not spies. We were just..." Before he could finish, the elder struck Xiao across the face. "Silence," he roared. "We've even heard you two talking in coded language." He signaled the guards to restrain them. But before anyone could move, Director Kim's sword flashed. In an instant, he sliced off the elder's hand with lightning speed. The elder froze, staring in shock as his sword clattered to the ground. Director Kim pointed his sword at the elder and said firmly, "This is the first sect I've ever joined, I'm no spy." But one of the guards behind him didn't believe a word. He charged forward, sword raised high. Before the blade could even reach him, Director Kim vanished in a blur of motion, and in the next instant, the hands of every guard in the room were sliced clean off. The guards froze in horror, then turned and fled in panic. Realizing that Director Kim had reached Martial Peak, they rushed to inform the sect leader. As they ran, Director Kim sheathed his sword and turned to Xiao. "I plan to visit other sects to continue my training," he said calmly. "What will you do?" Xiao immediately replied that he would accompany Director Kim and suggested they visit the unorthodox sect, the Dragon Fighting Stronghold. Hearing that, Director Kim laughed. "Fine then. You go ahead first, I'll meet you there. But before that, I'll end this pursuit from the demon-slaying sect once and for all." A few hours later, in the Dragon Fighting Stronghold's mountain range, Director Kim stood atop a cliff, his sword gleaming in the fading light. When Xiao finally climbed up, panting, Director Kim smirked. "What took you so long?" Xiao laughed between breaths. "You're just too fast." But as he spoke, his eyes drifted to Director Kim's sword. The blade was soaked in blood. Xiao's thoughts grew heavy. Not long ago, he used to scold me for being too violent, and now look at him. Even if it was to survive, this cruel world had changed them both. He sighed, thinking, it'd be nice if we could just go back. Not to this world of martial arts, but back to normal life on Earth. If he ever regressed again, Xiao wished he could return home. Still, he followed Director Kim up the mountain, accepting the reality before them. They were trapped in this world, and the only thing they could do now was survive and move forward. After being betrayed by the demon-slaying sect, Director Kim eventually took over the Dragon Fighting Stronghold. 2 years later, he traveled across Yenghua, challenging and defeating the strongest sects in every region. By the 3rd year, he had destroyed the emblems of every major sect, proving himself as the greatest martial artist under the heavens. With his unmatched strength and leadership, he united all the sects under one banner, forming the Martial Alliance. 7 years later, Xiao and Director Kim were closer than brothers, despite their age difference. One day, Director Kim handed Xiao a martial arts manual and said, "This is the Severing Mountain Sword." Xiao took the book and began reading. Director Kim explained, "I created this technique just for you. I named it so that you'll inherit its spirit, a will strong enough to cut down mountains themselves." He believed that if Xiao mastered this art, he would one day reach Martial Peak as well. As Seo flipped through the pages, he was stunned. Aside from what Director Kim had already told him, the manual also contained the Dragon Vein Chi method, a genuine first-rate martial art, far superior to any second or third-rate techniques he had ever seen. The Severing Mountain Sword was an incredibly powerful technique, one that could split mountains if mastered. Seo began training diligently under Director Kim's guidance, practicing day and night. But there was a problem. No matter how hard he tried, he simply couldn't grasp it. Every time they sparred, Seo would be on the ground within seconds. Watching him struggle, Director Kim sighed and said bluntly, "You really have no talent, do you?" And he was right. Despite being trained personally by the greatest martial artist under the heavens, using a technique crafted specifically for him, Seo barely reached third-rate level after a full year of training. 1 year later, Seo finally accepted reality. "It can't be helped," he said with a small laugh. "Maybe martial arts just isn't my thing. I do have a bit of talent in medicine, at least. Everyone's gifted in their own way, right?" Director Kim smiled faintly but didn't reply. Then, one day, a full decade later, Seo witnessed something unbelievable. Director Kim was meditating in the courtyard, surrounded by a radiant energy. Above his head, 5 glowing chi flower spheres floated in perfect harmony. Seo's eyes widened in disbelief. 5 chi flowers. That's the legendary stage, 5 energies converging to the origin. Suddenly, a massive surge of power erupted from Director Kim's body. His joints cracked, his bones shifted, and the air trembled under the sheer force of his internal energy. As Seo watched, Director Kim's white hair began turning black, his wrinkled face smoothing into that of a young man. The entire room filled with divine energy, making it impossible for Seo to even stand near him. When the energy finally settled, Seo looked up and froze. Standing before him was a young Director Kim, smiling confidently. His face, his voice, his body, everything had changed. Director Kim chuckled. "What's with that look? You seem surprised." Seo was stunned. "Brother, you look even younger than me." Director Kim laughed. "Do I, really? I feel incredible, full of life, like I could do anything." Seo grinned. "The world's going to lose their minds when they see this transformation." As Director Kim dressed, he said calmly, "Yes, and it's about time I hand over the leadership of the Murim Alliance to the next generation." Seo blinked. "But there's no one you've deemed worthy yet." Director Kim nodded. "You're right. The leader of the Murim Alliance must possess great martial skill and a true understanding of martial arts. Yet, not one among them has grasped that essence." Seo laughed. "That's because you're a monster, brother. There's no one in the world who can compare to you." Director Kim smiled faintly, looking out the window at the disciples training below. "Even so, we'll have to find someone," he said. Seo sighed. "There's no one out there with your kind of talent." 25 years later, in a quiet room at the heart of the Murim Alliance headquarters, Seo sat writing with a brush. 35 years had passed since he had started this new life in Dangsung. His once dark hair had turned gray, he was now in his mid-60s. As he wrote, his thoughts drifted to Director Kim, wondering where the young man was now, and what he was doing. A year after his miraculous transformation, Director Kim had officially stepped down as Murim Alliance leader, passing the position to the next generation, and then quietly disappeared from public life. Seo had also wanted to retire with Director Kim back then, but the chaotic state of the Murim Alliance forced him to stay. As its chief strategist, he had to spend many more years stabilizing the organization. Director Kim had told Seo that he wanted to wander the martial world, traveling across the Yin Kingdom. Perhaps because of that, he hadn't even attended Seo's retirement ceremony. Now, the old Seo stepped out of his room to get some fresh air. Looking around his house, he felt a deep loneliness. He had bought the place with great enthusiasm using his retirement money, but it was far too big for one person to live in alone. That was the problem. While he was lost in thought, he suddenly heard rustling from the bushes. Alarmed, he approached carefully, only to be shocked when Director Kim appeared before him, dressed in torn, ragged clothes. Seo was startled. "Director Kim! What's with your appearance? Why didn't you even come to my retirement ceremony? Where have you been all this time?" Director Kim just laughed weakly and collapsed to the ground. Seeing that, Seo rushed forward in concern. "Did something happen?" Staring up at the sky, Director Kim said quietly, "I truly believed I was blessed with martial talent." "Isn't that right? If I'm not a genius, then what am I?" He chuckled bitterly. I am clearly a martial arts genius. Perhaps in this entire Yen kingdom, among ordinary men like me, no one can match my talent. Hearing him call himself an ordinary person, Seo frowned in confusion. Ordinary? How could you be ordinary? Who under the heavens doesn't know you're the #1 martial artist in the world? Before Seo could finish, Director Kim's tone turned grave. Do you remember those cultivators from 35 years ago? The ones who kidnapped our comrades and flew through the skies? Seo, who had lived through that time twice, froze. Of course he remembered. Shock filled his face as he realized what Director Kim meant. Cultivators, he muttered. Director Kim nodded. Yes. Those monsters. They rarely reveal themselves, but they've been secretly pulling the strings of the Yin imperial family, manipulating the entire kingdom from the shadows. After the Murim alliance was established and its influence grew, the cultivators began interfering more openly. Director Kim had been furious, but to defy them was to oppose the empire itself. To protect the Murim alliance, he had no choice but to submit to their demands. Because of that, he stepped down as leader and, as a mere mortal, began wandering across the Yen kingdom hunting those cultivators alone. He sighed. They were almost impossible to find. And even when I did manage to track one down, they refused to fight me. They'd just sneer and say I wasn't worth their time, then vanish with illusions or fly away. I couldn't even touch them. Then his voice hardened. But 5 years ago, I finally found one who accepted my challenge. Seo's eyes widened with excitement. And? Did you win? Director Kim's lips curved into a faint smile. I did. Hearing that, Seo laughed and joked that if Director Kim had done something like that back when he was still the Murim alliance leader, he would have grabbed him by the neck himself. But as they shook hands, Director Kim's smile faded. He told Seo that the cultivator he fought had already reached the chi condensation realm. Even so, he could barely scratch the man's fingertip. Seo was shocked. Director Kim continued, saying that before the fight, the cultivator told him, if you can even graze my body, I'll count that as your victory. And so, he did win. But Director Kim didn't look happy. Seo asked in disbelief, was that cultivator one of the 10 great masters of the cultivation world or something? Director Kim shook his head. No. He said his realm was second from the bottom among cultivators. In martial arts terms, he was only a second-rate warrior. Seo froze. He couldn't understand. In both his past and present life, he knew cultivators were powerful beings, but Yonghune's martial arts had already reached the peak of humanity. He could perform skywalking, slice through steel and ancient pillars like tofu, yet even he could only scratch the fingertip of a low-tier cultivator? Director Kim smiled bitterly. I was a frog in a well. We can never stand against cultivators. They're like natural disasters. Seo began sweating as fear crept in. The things Director Kim described were terrifying. But then, Director Kim pulled something out of his pocket and said, today, I managed to cut that cultivator's wrist. Seo's eyes lit up. Then doesn't that mean your martial arts finally surpassed his? Director Kim shook his head. No, he just put on a talisman and his hand grew back instantly. He slowly stood up. It seems my martial path ends here. Seo looked stunned. What do you mean? Director Kim smiled faintly. I came to say goodbye. That cultivator said he admired my determination and offered to take me into his cultivation sect. I'll probably start as the youngest disciple. Seo's eyes widened. Wait, does that mean you'll become a cultivator? An immortal? But isn't that impossible for a body without spiritual roots? Director Kim nodded. For regular mortals, reaching the stage of 5 energies converging to the origin is equivalent to awakening the 5-element spiritual root that cultivators are born with. We mortals spend our entire lives just to form what they have naturally from birth. As he said that, Director Kim raised his sword and with one clean motion, cut open the very fabric of space. A glowing door appeared in midair. He turned back towards Seo with a calm smile. I must go now, to aim for a higher stage. Before stepping through the portal, he handed Seo a small book. This is my last gift to you. Then, without waiting for a reply, Director Kim walked into the door. And vanished into thin air. Seo stood there in shock, clutching the book tightly. When he opened it, the title read, Record of Transcending Cultivation and Exhausting Martial Arts. It was a record of one man's attempt to surpass cultivation using martial arts alone. Seo looked up into the empty sky, calling out, "Director Kim! Where are you going without me?" But there was no answer. Only silence. Time passed. 50 years later. Seo was lying in bed, weak and pale. Dying of a simple cold. Just like in his previous life. This was fate. No matter how hard a human struggles, they cannot escape it. Everything had changed: his house, his wealth, his achievements. But in the end, death came the same way. Still, this time, he had lived without regret. He worked harder than anyone, uniting the martial sects of Yenghua, earning fame and respect. Yet even with all that, a deep emptiness filled his heart. If we had pushed just a little harder, could Director Kim and I have reached the heavens? That was his final thought before his body trembled one last time. And Seo's second life came to an end. But just moments later, his blurry vision cleared. His eyes opened again. He was back. In the same forest, on the ascension path. Looking down, Seo realized his body was filled with overflowing energy. It wasn't a dream. He had regressed again. Before he could process it, a loud voice yelled, "Deputy Manager Seo, you bastard." It was Section Chief John, charging toward him in anger.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, smash the like button and subscribe the channel for more epic recaps.